My name's Matt, and I will be talking to Alex Akimov about balancing startup and large organization dynamics.
Hey Alex, good morning. How are you doing?
Hello, hello. I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to today's discussion. We will talk a lot about the fintechs because you work at Adyen before, and now you're working on Monite. And I think I would call you API guy, the guy who knows everything about the APIs. Am I correct?
Thank you very much. I would say, of course, there are many more people who know about APIs much more than I do, but APIs is one of my expertise, my passion. So yeah, let's talk about that as well.
But maybe we can get a step back before we dig deeper in the technical matter of the API. You work at Adyen, so this is, I would say, one of really well-known and successful European fintech companies. And you were there during the transition from 250 people up to 3,000, right?
Yes, this is correct. I joined Adyen in 2016, and I think at that time, of course, there were a lot of people who already knew Adyen and believed in it, but it wasn't still in the place where it is right now. And it was an amazing journey to see how everything grows, not only, of course, from the business perspective, but also from the company perspective, from the culture and processes and the technology. I think it was really, really amazing.
So this is really interesting. So I'm building company myself, so I scale it like from 3 people to 100, and I remember all the stages that were significant for the company. But this is really small scale, and I assume scaling from 250 up to 3,000, there is a lot of things that are changing, and each year the company is a completely different company. Could you elaborate more on the lessons learned and how this affected the engineering side on which you were working?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, if we think about the company and impact and everything, of course, like number of people, number of products, and all the business indicators, it's important, but this is not the main goal. So you need to scale only when there is when it is super painful not to scale, right? So this would be and that's what we observed at Adyen. There was a constant feeling that we need more people because we have so many areas, so many things to tackle, so many amazing projects, so many cool customers. And at the same time, we really wanted to make sure that for all the people who join us, we have a very good click. So we have something that is called like company culture. Like at Adyen, they focus a lot on what they call Adyen principles, Adyen formula. You can easily go and look up on the website. There is still a lot of videos from founders and from everybody explaining that. And I think actually, looking back, this was the key to success for Adyen's story, because when you scale that fast and that much, you really need to make sure that you can also scale the mindset. You can scale the approach to solving problems, and you don't have to waste time on different things that would slow you down. Of course, it's still challenging because Adyen, originally it's a Dutch company and headquartered here in Amsterdam, but they had like more than 20 offices all over the world. And even in Amsterdam, had people, I don't know, from more than 80 countries and nationalities. So you bring all these people from different places, from different backgrounds, like doing also different things in the organization. And you're looking for something that are important both like for you and for your counterparts and your colleagues. And this was quite interesting. I wouldn't say that we did not do any mistakes. And obviously, when you grow so fast, you want to experiment and try a lot of things. Adyen always tries to stay lean and operate as a startup. And at some point, for example, that's my personal opinion when I observe when we're several thousand people company, it's not always working when you try to do things as you would do in the startup. But this is also a conscious choice, like, okay, do you want to spend time on solving this problem for a customer, on setting up this process, or introducing something
That's all like it always interests me, like, because this is the accelerator for a career. I mean, scale, like the being while the company was scaling so fast and so big. So you mentioned one of the downside, but do you have some lessons like what you would do differently in a similar setup, like in a similar piece of speed of scaling with the next company, like when you get such a possibility?
Yeah, that's very interesting because once you're part of this success story, you can always say, okay, now I know the perfect recipe, right? And how to do everything. And this is partially my story as well, because after 6 years at Adyen, I decided, okay, now I join Monite as a small startup and we build an API platform, which is perfect, something that I like to do. And I have good ideas in mind how to build things also company-wide and technology-wise. And at the same time, you're going down like several levels deeper in terms of maturity of the processes, of technology, of everything that you have. And then you see that some things are not like working properly and you should actually like do it differently, or you understand why there were some decisions probably that made differently in your previous. Again, these are only like two different experiences that you have. I think what's important here is not only to look at your experience and talk to more people who succeeded, talk to more people who fail, and learn from them. And that's why I think it's amazing that we have this podcast. In general, that in the industry there are so many folks that are willing to share their findings. In general, if I compare working in a big organization like Adyen right now and a startup like Monite, I think you need to always understand what's applicable, what's not applicable. And I have a separate talk about this. If you want, you can look up. It's about your API strategy at enterprise versus startups at API Docs last year, so I can share a link later. But basically, you identify different patterns and you see how these patterns fit into your organization and into like the product that you have and into the people. And sometimes you make choices more about the speed, sometimes more about the quality. Sometimes you focus more on customers. Sometimes you just don't do this and you move on because you.
And you're for quite a while in Netherlands, and I'm always wondering, and it's always interesting for me. You're both foreigners working pretty international environment, and do you see something specific about the Dutch culture that influence the way you work, the engineering works? Have you noticed something like this?
Yes, definitely. I think the Dutch culture is amazing for achieving things together. So it's very collaborative. It is also, I think, called egalitarian, when you need to reach a consensus on different topics to move on as a group. And this is perfect when you have some complex challenges in mind, when you don't have like a perfect solution only yourself. So you need to talk to a lot of people before you can come up with something that can be improved. Adyen is a perfect example of also Dutch culture. One of the principles is that you always share your ideas with others. So even if you think you're the smartest, if you know everything about APIs, it's always good to have more people in the room to learn their perspectives. And that's what we did, for example, with API consoles. We started inviting more people like technical support, implementation managers, account managers, backend developers, other people, not only just engineering, not only just product, but multiple people. And every time we had a discussion, we were able to improve something together. Dutch people are also known for talking straight. They always claim that they're one of the straightest people on this planet. Probably yes, probably no. For me, I think also coming from Eastern European background, that's quite okay. Yeah, I think being straight is helpful, especially when you deal with tech and you don't have time sometimes to figure out how this works. You need to move fast. So you just say as you see it is, and then you agree or disagree and move on together. It's more important that you have shared values and shared goals. You want to help customers, you want to achieve this. That maybe is just some findings, but obviously when you live in the country, you find a lot of other circumstances, and also you find that all the people are different, which is quite normal. My neighbors, like from one side and from another side, they're very different, and they're all Dutch. So then that also means that that's the world where we live.
And let's talk about the API. So you built APIs for millions of users. So I'm wondering if you could share some lessons learned about it. Like if there are some companies that are scaling, they are on the enterprise level and they want to build something to handle so many users. Like, what are your lessons learned? How would you approach building the API?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think there are a lot of playbooks already available on the internet, how you build an API, how you expose an API. In my opinion, it's important first to start with understanding like who are the users, who are the audience you're building this API for, and is it something you're just building from scratch? For example, if you're a startup or small organization, you never had a public API, and actually your whole product is an API, like in the case of Monite. That's one approach. Another approach would be if you're working for a big traditional bank, for example, and you never had a public API, but you have thousands of internal APIs, microservices, whatever, and now you need to comply with, I don't know, PSD2 open banking, other standards, and you expose your API, or you build an API for partners. These partners will be, only no more than 10 organizations very well known to you with the development teams. And if you really know these users who will be connecting to your API, you can start with experimenting, sharing them with them the documentation examples, and adjusting your API only to their specific needs. But when you are building an API for millions of users, that's another story, because you will never be able to talk to all of them. You will only make assumptions. And this means that you really need to stay agile. You really need to understand that you will change your API, you will break it. And this means that you will need to have a good contract understanding what's a breaking change, what's not a breaking change, which is also not given in the industry. There are still a lot of different debates on that. You will need to have your API version. How do you version it? How your customers understand about the version they're using. Do you release one version a year, or do you have hundreds of versions a year? All this sounds quite straightforward, but when you start implementing this, it's quite complex. And at the end of the day, what's still important, and many people, especially in engineering, tend to forget, that of course it's a technical product, and of course it's another developer interacting with it. But at the end of the day, it's not about JSON versus, REST, GraphQL. It's not about only how you name this field. It's, of course, about security. It's about performance. It's about scalability. But at the end of the day, it's about the value that the end users will see with this API. And that's why you really always need to understand how the end product should look like, which is not easy when it's just an API. So you need to visualize. You need to understand what kind of UIs can we do. And this means you need to be in a constant learning process, trying to see, okay, these are the examples, talking to customers, talking to somebody who understands it. That's not easy. But if you achieve this, then you achieve a high quality API like Stripe, like Adyen, like Twilio, like many other companies.
And the biggest mistake that you have seen that maybe are not so obvious, do you have some biggest mistakes that you've seen while people are building the API?
I would say, of course, not having API versioning. I've seen this still, and it's amazing that even very big companies, established organizations, sometimes they just break something, or they tell you, okay, in 10 days we will remove this, and you have to adjust your integration. Obviously, there is an alternative strategy, API evolution, when you don't have versioning, or you just keep adding stuff, which is also fine, but still it means that you're accumulating internally a lot of technical debt, so you need to have some strategy to clean up, which is even more complicated sometimes, which is fine. And then the second biggest mistake, I would say, not implementing API authentication, probably, because if you look at last top 10 security issues, I think most of the issues always happened when they were unsecured. So there is a very good resource on the internet, API Sec University, where there are free courses and a lot of explanation. And recently we also talked to them. According to their data, it's always a problem with authentication, problem number one. There are, of course, other 9 problems, but the first. And the third problem is not taking care about your end users. Because API is a technical product, you always care about your current users who are developers, which is great. Developer experience is super important. But if you don't take care of your end users, you will build something that nobody really wants.
You worked in a few organizations, so you have seen a lot on the engineering perspective. And I recently had an interesting conversation with one of my guests, and we were talking about the over-engineering in Europe versus US while building the product while working on an engineering side. And we were discussing that in the US, they are even the engineers are really business driven. So this was his assumption. And I don't know, like maybe in Europe we are not so business driven, but we are really good engineers. So we focus so much on the engineering, and we sometimes over engineer the things, overthinking the stuff. Have you experienced that in your career?
I think yes. This is partially what I also observed a lot. Of course, now luckily with remote work and everything, the engineering culture is also blending. So if there are like engineers from like working for small US-based companies with different like approach to achieving value, I think this is now also what we can observe more in European companies, and also like in my organization, I have engineers from Europe, from US, from UK, from different regions. So it's all maybe about how you build things also from the product side, how the product is requiring your engineers to deliver. Do you have product teams in your organization? How do you format? How do you work together? How do you involve your engineers in meetings with customers? And maybe one of the reasons, by the way, can be the language barrier, because if you're an English speaker, you can easily go and talk to your customers, also most like English speakers, or it's an international, right? But if you're not comfortable with speaking and you're still a very good engineer, you'll find your place in the organization, but you will be like blocked from any ability, or like also yourself, not because somebody blocks you, but yourself, you're not feeling comfortable going and talking and trying to figure out, and you focus more on technical things. This can be the case as well. And maybe one last example here. Sorry, now I remember. If you think about even the policies, international policies created by like US or by European Union, if you think about how complex GDPR is, or like PSD2 or everything, I think maybe it's also part of the, I don't know, national character of trying to achieve consensus, because when you try to achieve consensus between so many like countries and parties, you build something very complex, and this is just part how you the process how you achieve things. While in the US, it's all about speed, delivery, value, because it's either like go big or go home, right? So it's always about that, and you do everything to make it faster.
Yeah, the GDPR is the perfect example of comparing the cultures, right? So I absolutely love it. It's perfect comparison. Alex, I really like to talk about the tough things and the hard things that you have got during your career, because usually during those times we learn the most, right? They are challenging, they are tough, but we have things that change our approach to what we do in the future. Once in a lifetime. So I'm just wondering, could you describe me a time when you were a part maybe of a controversial decision, leadership decision in engineering department? What was it, and maybe what you have learned from it?
Obviously, I think there were multiple things in my career that I felt, it's very controversial, and with some of them I can agree now, with some of them I would not probably still agree. And on the people side, quite often it's about, I don't know, reorganization. Quite often it's about like changing teams and people and their aspirations, or even worse, it's about abandoning some of the products that your team was working on for a year, even more. So this always hits hard, because we are creative people. We like to do something that will leave a value. And also, most of us, because we are an organization, we get attached to people we work with. We like being together. And that's why all the changes, they're usually quite hard. I learned it hard way, but also I understand that it's necessary. And also, sometimes it's a moment for us to even switch organizations to go to another place. I did almost 3 years ago with Adyen, for example. Yeah, maybe it wasn't easy, but it's inevitable. Another thing which was really controversial is about, I don't know, on the technical side, I can have numerous examples. For example, do we build a monolith, or do we build microservices? Or like, okay, what do we now get a distributed monolith with a lot of microservices? How do we maintain it? How much overhead we have here? Is it a good solution for this size of organization, for this platform? Is it not? So this type of architectural decisions are also quite hard and also quite hard to recover. And then, of course, something like, okay, we need to implement this functionality right now, like API versioning, but there is no good framework for that. What do we do right now? Do we want to build something custom and invest in that, or do we want to build something as a workaround and live with this forever? This is also one of the hardest decisions we ever made as an engineering group, and I would say we could do better. I don't want to give any more examples here, but in general. And this is something that strikes me. And maybe the last point that I really learned hard throughout my career is a skill which is often referred as delegation, but I recently heard a very good definition of that from one of my fellow CTOs who said, okay, you should always optimize for not being present, which basically means that everything that you do and every process you set up and how you empower your people, you always optimize for a moment when you're not available for any reasons. You can be on holidays, or you can be in another call, or you can do stuff. And that's what I learned hard way myself, because when you do something and you're good at it, you're always trying to be like doing this more, and you're doing this more and less if people rely on you. And then obviously you become a bottleneck.
So I have two more questions that I wanted to ask you. One is because you grew from a head of API, you were VP of technology, and now you're a CTO for like a couple of months. And it's a new role, and I'm just wondering, what are your current challenges? What are your current things that you are learning? What do you have on your plate this year, to solve?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is similar to what I had before, but it's still quite new, because it's a lot about people, and it's a lot more about people than about technology, at least at this point of the organization, and at least according to my point of view and my strategy. So where do I find the right talent? Because we are remote first, we can hire from everywhere. Who are these people? How do we expand our teams? How do we enable people who are already on board? How do we help them? And what are the right challenges for them? Then, of course, the second challenge is that how do we deliver everything for the business? Because when you focus on the tech part, it's already given, okay, we need to achieve it. But then how do we align business goals where I can have more influence now, and the budget and customer expectation and everything with what my team can deliver, and more important, what my team wants to deliver. So this is also kind of a challenge. And then of course all the technical challenges like scalability, performance, security, what I mentioned. It's very interesting when you build a startup and when you build a very big technological platform. But also it's amazing when you're only in the very beginning still. So it's not like you cannot change a lot, but also every decision is fundamental.
And the last question that I have, if you could mention one book that was really influential on your career as a technical leader, do you recall like the title of the book that you could recommend?
I think the most fundamental book for me, it was very early in my career. It was Cybernetics from Norbert Wiener. It's a very old book, but I don't know if anybody is reading this book these days. In general, I think Team Topologies is a good one. Maybe many people recommend it. And also An Elegant Puzzle. It's one of the recent ones I read from, should I have it somewhere here? From Will Larson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like definitely.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alex, for a great talk today.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Follow Matt on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Better Tech Leadership newsletter.